And now this brings us to a question some people may have, or it might come across the minds of some of the people, and that is with regards to the establishment of the beginning of the month of Ramadan, and likewise the end of the month of Ramadan and all of the months in general. That is not allowed to rely upon or to depend upon the calculation method. It's not allowed. It will not be accepted. It's not allowed. It is not accepted. It's not considered. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah mentioned that to rely upon that is an innovation, and it's also misguidance. In any case, this is something that is not accepted. So with regards to the coming, the entrance of the months, and Ramadan specifically, and likewise the closing of the months, Ramadan specifically, then it's not allowed to rely upon the calculation method. So the question is now, why do the people of knowledge mention that it's not allowed to rely upon the calculation method in the establishment of the months, yet it's allowed in the establishment of the times of the prayers, Everybody with me? Is it allowed to use calculation method to establish the coming of Ramadan?
No.
Is it allowed to rely upon independently the calculation method to establish the coming of Eid? No, it's not allowed. Is it allowed to rely upon the calculation method to establish the imsak? The imsak and the iftar. What about the time for Fajr? Is it allowed to use the calculation method to establish the time for Fajr?
Yes.
For Dhuhr? For Asr? For Maghrib? For Isha? It's allowed to use the calculation method for these affairs. Okay, why here and not there? Why here and not there? This is the question. Some people may have this question, or some people who defend their position or their stance with regards to al-hisab al-falaki fi dukhuli shahr Ramadan wa khurujihi. Why here? Now.
The Prophet specified for the coming of the month and for the going out that has an excitement. That's one. Also, the calculations, as in terms of the month, sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But the ones with the salat, the times of the salat, they're accurate. They've been tested. People have tested and they're accurate.
Ahsanta. This is the reason why. I know somebody didn't hear. Somebody else. Abdul You heard him?
No.
Somebody in the back. Give it again. Sometimes people hear it, but they don't comprehend it all the way.
It said that the prayer times have been tested and calculated, and people of knowledge looked into them, and they have found that they're accurate. As for the calculation for the beginning of the month of Ramadan, then the Prophet specified how to calculate that, and it might be right or wrong. So if they calculate 30 days, the moon might be sighted on the 29th.
Ahsant. The months in general, they're not stable. They're either 29 or 30. So for example, maybe Sha'ban this year is 29 days. Maybe last year it was 30. It could be the same, it could not be the same. So the months, they change. So maybe one month, maybe for example, Al-Muharram was 29 last year, maybe it will be 30 this year. Or maybe it will be 29, then it will be 30 next year. Like this is something that's not, it's not stable. It's depending upon the sighting of the moon and the likes like this. So this is already in something that's not stable. But as for the prayer, then it's coupled to the position of the sun. And these calculations here, they do not change. So the Fajr time in today, this year, is the same time, the same day next year. A person, he could have one prayer schedule for the whole year, and he could keep it for next year and the next year and the next year, and the times, they're the same. They're the same. So deciding these calculations in time based upon the sun, then the calculations are very precise. They're very precise. As for deciding the calculations based upon the moon, then they're not precise, because the moon, the calculation of the months by the moon, they change. They vary, either 29 or 30. 29 or 30. So this is one aspect from the, we could say the intellectual point of view. But the real point is because in looking at these affairs here, we find that the calculation method with regards to the moon is not in accordance with the legislative signs. It's not in accordance with the legislative signs. There are alamat shar'iyyah. There are signs, there's legislative signs that have been placed, that had been set in place by Allah Azza wa Jalla, that would determine the entrance of the months, that determine the entrance of the months. And likewise, there are legislative signs as well. Alamat shar'iyyah lidukhuli kulli waqtin li kulli salah. وَخُرُوجِهِ كَذَلِكَ. There are signs, legislative signs, that have been placed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in clarifying the time for the entrance of every prayer and the leaving of every prayer. And if we look at the calculation methods, we'll find that those calculations are very precise and very close to the legislative signs of the time, of the salat. For example, if we look at the time of the Fajr, we will find that time there, for a person who will go into the fields and to go out into the countryside, he will find that it's very precise. And the rising of the Fajr comes almost precisely or very close to that time, if not exactly. And likewise, if we look at the time of Shuruq and we watch for the sun to rise and to crack the horizon, you will find that it happens at that time. So these calculations are in accordance with the legislative signs. And if we look at the shadows and the likes like this for the dhuhr, whenever the shade stops to move and then it starts to move again on the other side, it's almost precisely in accordance with those calculations. And likewise, if we look at the shade, how it grows, and it'll be the length of one person, and then the asr will come in and the likes like this. Those times that are calculated, they're in accordance almost precisely with the legislative signs. So these calculations, they're just helping us to see the legislative signs and to use them. They're not in conflict with them. So it's a means and it's a tool to facilitate and make it easy. And when we look at them in reality, for example, now it's Maghrib time. If we were to look at the time on the prayer schedule and to look at the sun when it's going down, it's almost exactly precise. You will find that the sun will go behind the horizon almost completely, entirely at the same time that it is on the prayer schedule. So therefore, these calculations here, whenever we look at them in detail, we find that they're in accordance with the legislative signs that Allah Azza wa Jal He has placed. And as for the legislative signs for the entrances of the months, then this is with regard to the sighting of the moon. And those calculation methods, they're relying upon the presence of the moon. And we're never ordered to find out whether the moon is there or not, but rather we're ordered to see the moon. And if we do not see it, then we go 30 days. Even if something is blocking the view and possibly the moon is there. And we have seen likewise that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, to know if the moon was there or not is something that's very, very simple and easy. And Allah could send revelation to the Prophet ﷺ to inform him that although you cannot see the moon, behind the cloud cover the moon is there, so therefore you fast tomorrow. But this did not occur. And so therefore this is a clarification that it's not relied upon. The presence of the moon is not relied upon. What is relied upon is the sighting of the moon. So therefore the calculations that they have with regards to the entrances of the months, Ramadan specifically, they're not in accordance with the legislative signs. So therefore the people of knowledge do not accept them. As for the calculations with the coming of the prayers and the times of the prayers, then when we look at them, we find that they're in accordance with the legislative signs. So therefore the people of knowledge, they accept them. So it's not desires, it's not whims, it's not this country or that country. Rather, it's deen. Rather, it's Quran and Hadith. You look into these verses and look into these narrations, you look into the signs that are placed in the deen of Allah, and this one is in accordance, so we follow it, and this one is not in accordance, so we do not follow it. We understand this point? Alhamdulillah. The people of knowledge, they say that knowledge is a light, and a person, he will be able to see. The greater the light, the further one can see, and the more clear one can see likewise. And also, whenever the light comes, the darkness goes away. So likewise, whenever the knowledge comes, if it's profound and proper, then as well the doubts will go away. And also the ignorance will go away, and a person, he will see straight and be upon certainty and clarity in his religion. And this is the greatest of all blessings, to have certainty in one's deen, and to be upon insight with no doubts whatsoever with regards to one's religious affair, and in the fact that there's nothing worthy of worship except for Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To have certainty about this is the greatest of all favors and blessings, and the foundation of that is from knowledge.